Hi guys, I'm Emily May Manuel, BSBA, major in Financial Management, and I'm reporting Module 7, GAT-NAFTA, Regional Economic Integration. My part is all about APEC. So what is APEC? APEC, or Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, is a forum for 21 Pacific Rim countries that seeks to promote free trade and economic cooperation throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Ang APEC daw is a meeting ng 21 countries na nagpo-promote ng free trade and economic cooperation sa Asia-Pacific region. If you're not satisfied with the meaning of APEC, I have a video downloaded in YouTube, and here, just watch it.
Follow the news. Chances are you've heard of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, more commonly known as APEC. You would have also seen footage and photos of world leaders gathering during the yearly APEC Economic Leaders Meetings. For a lot of people, that's the extent of what they know about APEC. Of course, it is much more than that. APEC is a multilateral organization made up of 21 members that line the Pacific Ocean who are working towards a common goal of bringing growth and prosperity to the Asia-Pacific region. APEC's members participate in the forum as economies. This emphasizes the forum's focus on matters of trade and economic cooperation. Under these conditions, members who have different approaches to policy can find a common approach to finding solutions and getting things done. APEC is culturally diverse. It includes both developing and advanced economies. Collectively, the APEC region is home to almost 3 billion people, accounting for half of world trade and more than half of the global economy. It is important that we understand that APEC isn't just the annual leaders meeting. In fact, it is a continuous process involving around 20,000 representatives from all levels of government, with representatives from business and the academia, attending hundreds of meetings held all year long. They meet to ensure that goods, services, investment, and people move easily across borders. Members align regulations, set standards, and agree upon policies that make it easier to be an entrepreneur in the region. Officials learn from each other about dozens of topics, ranging from economic growth, increasing the participation of women in the economy, energy, public health, e-commerce, to the environment, and the list goes on. Diverse as APEC is, getting everyone to be on the same page requires a lot of work. Which brings us to one of APEC's defining characteristics. By intent and tradition, APEC is less formal than other forums, and its outcomes may be adopted by members voluntarily. This may seem unusual, but it makes APEC an important platform for cooperation. Even as members deal with delicate issues outside the forum, they will continue to engage each other in APEC. The forum is consensus-driven, and each member has an equal say in decision-making. Because members can cooperate without the pressure of binding agreements, there is less inhibition around new initiatives. This has made APEC a test kitchen of sorts, which has developed more than a few successful ideas that have been adopted by other organizations. APEC's structure has allowed it to grow organically and adapt easily to the times. Although it may not be obvious, we feel its effects. APEC is changing the way the world works and is making life better for people in the Asia-Pacific region. To learn more about us, visit www.
In the video, said that these countries gathered to discuss and focus in matters and trade and economic cooperation. They are finding solutions and getting things done. APEC includes developing and advanced economies. They meet to ensure that goods, services, investment, and people to easily across borders. And that is APEC. APEC established in 1989 in response to the growing interdependence of Asia-Pacific economies and the advent of regional economic blocs such as the European Union, in other parts of the world. APEC works to raise living standards and education levels through sustainable economic growth and to foster a sense of community and an appreciation of shared interest among Asia-Pacific countries. And I have a video downloaded kung paano nila sinasagawa ang kanilang gatherings or pag sila'y nagkita-kita. Watch it, guys.
A bunch of world leaders, a lot of serious discussions, and at least a few slightly awkward family photos. It's all part of APEC. That stands for Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. It's a bit like a club made up of 21 developed and developing countries, including Australia. And together they count for more than 2.7 billion people and more than half of the world's money. APEC was started by this man, former Australian PM Bob Hawke, back in 1989. He wanted to bring together nations along the Pacific Rim. That means they're around the Pacific Ocean or islands within it, so they could talk about their economies, free trade and investment. While that might not sound super exciting, it is super important. Most countries rely on each other to trade sometimes billions of dollars worth of goods and services, and the idea of the regular meeting was to have better ways of doing that. At first, APEC meetings were pretty cash. There weren't as many member countries and no world leaders. But in 1993, then US President Bill Clinton was like, hey gang, why don't all of us prime ministers and presidents go and hang out and talk about trade and stuff too? And that's how the APEC leaders meeting started. Every year, the world leaders get together, always in a different member country, which explains all the traditional outfits. This year, it was Papua New Guinea's turn. Australia's leader Scott Morrison was there, along with New Zealand's PM Jacinda Ardern, Canada's Justin Trudeau, China's President Xi Jinping, and many others. But no Trump and no Russian President Vladimir Putin this year. Instead, they sent their seconds in charge. But some people aren't a big fan of just how much these meetings about money actually cost. Others say APEC is more about helping rich countries get richer when it should be doing more to help poor countries like host PNG. PNG has spent a lot of money getting ready to host the VIPs and 15,000 delegates. It's built new buildings, renovated its airport, and got some very fancy transport. It has had help from China and Australia. We provided security, including a massive assault ship, armoured vehicles, helicopters, fighter jets, and Special Forces soldiers. But PNG also got some long-term benefits out of this meeting. Australia, the US, Japan, and New Zealand announced they'll be helping the developing country to provide internet and electricity to way more people. Australia and the US are also set to buddy up to build a military base on Manus Island. Most experts say the aim of this development is to try to make sure that China doesn't gain too much power in the strategically important region. And it seems that power struggle between China and the US in particular caused a lot of tension this year. The leaders usually release a joint statement at the end of the meeting. But for the first time in APEC history, they couldn't all agree on anything. So while the idea of these meetings is for everyone to get together as one big happy family, with a group this big and so many competing interests, maybe it's easier said than done.
And here is the APEC. Here's the APEC members countries: Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, China, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, Mexico, Malaysia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Peru, Philippines, Russia, Singapore, Taiwan, Thailand, United States, and Vietnam. Next is APEC, APEC in Bogor, Indonesia. During the meeting in 1994 in Bogor, Indonesia, APEC leaders adopted Bogor goals that aims for free and open trade and investment in the Asia Pacific by 2010 for industrialized economies and by 2020 for developing economies. APEC established a business advisory body named the APEC Business Advisory Council or ABAC, composed of 3 business executives from each member economy. To meet the Bogor goals, APEC carries out work in 3 main areas. So, what is these 3 main areas? Number 1, trade and investment liberalization. So, what is trade and investment liberalization in APEC? Trade and investment liberalization is one of the core elements of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum's overall economic program. At their second meeting in November 1994 at Bogor, APEC leaders agreed on a timetable for implementing APEC's liberalization program. Developed member economies would move to free trade and investment by 2010 and developing economies by 2020. In articulating this agenda, APEC leaders were building on an extended history of liberalization throughout the region. Trade liberalization, in particular, has been an important feature of the economic environment in many APEC economies for a long period. Number 2, business facilitation. Business facilitation, APEC members pursue measures to reduce the time, cost, and uncertainty of doing business in the region and open new economic opportunities, including for small firms, women, and youth. Number 3, economic and technical cooperation. Economic and technical cooperation, or ECOTEC, is aimed at fostering sustainable and inclusive growth and development in the Asia-Pacific and improving overall economic and social well-being of all citizens living across the APEC region. So that is the 3 main areas. Next, APEC is considering the prospects and options for a free trade area of the Asia-Pacific or FTAAP, which all include all APEC member economies. Since 2006, the APEC Business Advisory Council, promoting the theory that a free trade area has the best chance of converging the member nations and ensuring stable economic growth under free trade, has lobbied for the creation of a high-level task force to study and develop a plan for a free trade area. The proposal for a FTAAP arose due to the lack of progress in the Doha round of World Trade Organization negotiations, and as a way to overcome the spaghetti bowl effect created by overlapping and conflicting elements of the umpteen free trade agreements. There are approximately 60 free trade agreements, with an additional 117 in the process of negotiation in Southeast Asia and the Asia-Pacific region. So, ano ba itong spaghetti bowl effect na sinasabi? The spaghetti bowl effect is the multiplication of free trade agreements supplanting multilateral World Trade Organization negotiations as an alternative path toward globalization. The term was first used by Jagdish Bhagwati in 1995 in the paper U.S. Trade Policy, The Infatuation with Free Trade Agreements, where he openly criticized FTA as being paradoxically counterproductive in promoting freer and more open global trades. According to Bhagwati, too many crisscrossing FTA would allow countries to adopt discriminatory trade policies and reduce the economic benefits of trade. And last, we have the glossary, where the important word or things in the APEC lesson. The community, a group of interdependent organisms inhabiting the same region and interacting with each other, or a group sharing a common understanding and often the same language, manners, tradition, and law. Developing of a country, becoming economically more mature or advanced, or becoming industrialized. Next is economy. It is the collective focus of the study of money, currency, and trade, and the efficient use in resources. The system of production and distribution and consumption. The overall measure of a currency system as the national economy. Next is the free trade. A policy which a government does not discriminate against imports and interfere with exports by applying tariffs to imports or subsidies to exports or quotas. International trade free from government interference, especially trade free from tariffs or duties on imports. Next is goal. A desired result that one works to achieve, a result that one is attempting to achieve. Interdependence, the condition of being interdependent. Next is interest, the price paid for obtaining or price received for providing money or goods in a credit transaction, calculated as a fraction of the amount or value of what was borrowed. A great attention and concern from someone or something. Intellectual curiosity. Investment, a placement of capital in expectation of deriving income or profit from its use. Next is process, a series of events to produce a result, especially as contrasted to product, or in reference to capabilities. A process is how the capability is executed. Prospect, the potential things that may come to pass, often favorable, or a potential customer. Standard, something used as a measure of comparative evaluations, or a level of quality or attainment. Task force, a group of people working toward a particular task, project, or activity specially assigned in a particular capacity. That's all of my report. Thank you.